My name is Roman Djindjihashvili, and topic of today's lecture is climax in World Championship matches. First, I'm picking up a match between absolutely great players in the history of the game, Botvinnik and Bronstein. This is, in my mind, very, very special match between very special two players. And what makes them very special? They are absolutely different representatives of the same chess school. Botvinnik is 100% academic and very logical and very disciplined player who invented a lot of positional aspects of the chess game that we use today, and who was absolutely great for his time. He was the world champion. And the second player was David Bronstein. He's a highly unusual player. Well, in comparison to Botvinnik, you could see that Bronstein was, when Botvinnik had everything worked out perfectly in the opening, and he was playing every position in the opening was very well known for him, and he followed positional principles religiously. Opposing to him, Bronstein was extremely creative, very creative, and he was creative in the peak of his career, in a very young age, and much later. I happened to play him, several games in the years ago in the USSR Championship, in a couple of other tournaments. And even then, being already far from his prime, even then, he was extremely creative. Match was very interesting, and then at that time, they were two best players in the world. In 1951, match was played in that regulation, 24 games of the match. And 24 games, you cannot see 24 games World Championship match played today, because first of all, it's very expensive to the organizers, because match should be held in some very exclusive site, and that site charges a lot of money, and playing match for 2 months. The frequency they were playing, it's one game every 2 days. One day they play game, and after 40 moves, game adjourns, and if they have to resume game next day, they will resume and play it. If not, the following day, then it's a day off. So it was taking approximately 2 months, and today they don't do that. Today they play 24 games, maybe in 3-4 days. So match was absolutely exhausting, and after 22 games, score was 11-11. 2 games in match was, it's wrong. Match was 11, not 11 to 11, but match was 11.5 to 10.5, Bronstein's favor. So with 2 games to go, Botvinnik had to win 1 game. In game 23 that we're going to look now, was played by Botvinnik when he was white. And according to match regulations, if match ends with the even score, 12-12, then world championship, which was Botvinnik, then he keeps his title. The prize money, which wasn't much then, of course, prize money would split evenly, but most important was the title. Title would be kept by the current world champion, who was Botvinnik. So this game where Botvinnik is white, he practically must win game, because the last game he would be black and it should be relatively easy for Bronstein to draw. So game was played, Botvinnik white, d4, knight f6, c4, g6, g3. It's interesting that so many years later, 57, 58 years later, just this year, a couple of months ago, two former world champions, Kasparov and Karpov, played this very rare move order, G3 I'm talking about. So just played match, just ended a month ago or so. C6, bishop G2, D5, C takes D, C takes D, knight C3, bishop G7, and knight H3. According to today's theory, knight f3 is the best move. It's most logical move, of course, was known to Botvinnik. And after knight c6, knight e5, white's supposed to have small edge. Knight h3 was played. Bishop takes h3. Bishop takes h3. The reason why Bronstein gave up that bishop is because he wants to play e6 and getting rid of bad c8 bishop and then go knight c6. This is the kind of decision that would be highly criticized, not by a human, by Rybka. And today, Rybka's opinion is valued a lot higher than any human's. Two bishops for no compensation. So after bishop takes h3 and bishop takes h3, knight c6, bishop g2, e6, e3, nothing exciting, yet castling, bishop d2, rook c8, castle for white, knight d7, and here white plays knight e2, so trying to put knight on better position, knight f4 and knight d3. Black plays queen b6, bishop c3, and now rook fd8. Black plays just general moves, bringing pieces towards the center. Rook fd8, knight f4, knight f6, queen b3, knight e4. Well, I think it was okay for black to play queen takes b3, followed by a6. I like this decision. I like to give white double pawn rather than get for black. And now if white goes knight d3 with an idea of knight c5, possibly knight d7, but still white is slightly better after b4 with the idea of playing knight c5. Well, Bronstein made a different decision. After queen b3, he played knight e4. And Botvinnik exchanged queens. This is interesting. He plays that's what I meant by academic style. He exchanges queens in the game that he needs to win. He tries to increase slowly slight advantage that he has. And now bishop e1. Of course, the only advantage white has is two bishops, and they have tried to keep it, and later on to play f3. So bishop e1, knight a5, knight d3, bishop f8. In this position, after bishop f8, f3 was played, knight d6, now bishop f2, bishop h6, and rook ac1. After rook ac1, black made a mistake. They played knight c4, and white played rook fe1. Black had here very strong continuation, giving them at least total equality. And the move was knight f5. Well, it looks like knight f5 does the same thing as knight c4, attacking e3 pawn, which white protected, but white would have had problems protecting the pawn after knight f5, because on rook fe1, rook takes c1, knight must take, and black can get undisputed control of c file, which is a problem for white. So probably the best move on knight f5 is to play f4. After knight f5, to play f4. But if white plays f4, that makes their bishop on f2 very bad. That means white will never have a chance to go e4 after knight d6. And now white doesn't have the shadow of the advantage. Position is favorable for side who has knights. Position is closed, and after next move, for example, f5, black is doing very well. So that was missed by Bronstein, who played knight to c4, and after rook f to e1, knight a5. Even now, knight f5 was very, very strong move. Knight f5, white has no way to protect e3 pawn without playing f4. Well, actually, after knight ac4, rook e1, knight f5 now even stronger. Knight f5, f4, knight d6, with absolutely great position for black. And I think if this was played, we would have had Bronstein as a world champion, because I don't see how can possibly white win this game. But it's easy to give an advice, you know, when the game is over. It's even easier to give 55 years later the advice what should have been done. But you see, both players were under tremendous pressure, and knight f5 was simply missed by black. So instead of knight f5, knight a5 back was played, king f1, king g7. Now you see how methodically both winning. That's the strongest part of his game, how methodically he increased his advantage and won a very important game. He played b3, knight b5, king e2, bishop fa. Well, actually, in this position, it was played king g8, a4, was played knight d6, and we actually don't have to see the whole game. What happened eventually, white exchanged rooks and broke through e4, and white won the game. Now they have clear advantage, and as commentators were saying about this game, that white has clear small advantage. According to Rybka, and computers are not as good, not supposed to be as good as white, as humans in positional game. According to Rybka, white has very big advantage, nearly winning one. So game was won by white, and that equal the score in the match. And now we have the last game coming, and it's very difficult in the tournament situations to play to win last game when you need only the win. I know that because I've seen a lot of times situation in the match, in the tournament, when one side has to win the game and no draw is acceptable, and it's been done in on very rare occasion. I remember in 1978, 77, 78, I played in England in very prestigious Hastings tournament, and there was OGM tournament, and Tigran Petrosyan was there, and I was very friendly with him, and I was leading before the last round. I was in clear first place, and I needed to play Vlastimil Hort in the last round. And I told Petrosyan, who was 1 point behind me, and who was happy the way he was doing. He never lost the game there in the tournament. And I told him, well, I want to win the tournament, so I must play for a win in the last round, because a couple of people half a point behind me, they can catch me. He told me that he was very experienced, and I was a lot younger, obviously. He told me, nobody wins in a last round when they can only win, when they must only win. He said, nobody wins. I took his advice, and he said, make a quick draw, which was offered to me by Hort because I was white. He said, take a quick draw and let's watch soccer game. I took his advice, and two of my competitors, where they were half a point behind me, one of them drew quickly, and the other one pressed hard, and he lost the game. Well, this stuck very much in my memory, and that's why I brought you this game. But we're going to be discussing in a different lecture the other match, World Championship match, when this did happen, and player that had to win, he did win. The player was Kasparov. Well, Kasparov is highly unusual case and highly unusual player, not a very unorthodox player. And well, the other player, very unorthodox and super strong, was Fischer. But the difference between them that Fischer was never in the situation where he had to win in the last round. Never in his career. Every time he played the tournament or match, he has won this match 3 or 4 games before the end of the match. So we didn't get a chance to test him. So in this, going back to Botvinnik-Bronstein match, I will tell you that score is even, and now the last game of the match, and now Bronstein is better, is white, and he is in a must-win situation. Bronstein was very emotional player, and Botvinnik is a lot more calm and academic player. So Botvinnik played his normal game, and you can tell by the moves that Bronstein's moves and the game was a little bit neurotic, and he was out of control. Well, d4, d5, c4, c6. That was Slav defense that was not very well explored those years. And again, I repeat, this is 1951. Knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, e6. And Botvinnik is playing Botvinnik variation. That is very well explored today. Bishop g5. Botvinnik is black, dc. a4. Bishop b4. e4. c5. Bishop takes c4. cd. Knight takes d4. And h6. Of course, bishop h4 is not a good move because after g5 and knight takes e4, white has no compensation. And Bronstein played bishop e3 here. This is a bad move. After bishop e3, white has absolutely no advantage, and their win is practically out of question. Knight takes e4 was played. Now, and we're going to see that white got nowhere, got nothing. And let's see what was. If we criticize the move, then we have to give an alternative. Alternative, and very good alternative in this position, is bishop f4 move, not bishop e3. Both of those moves are pawn sacrifice, e4 pawn sacrifice. And let me tell you what would have happened if black had accepted this pawn sacrifice. Castle. Now, the best, this was analyzed on Ripko, the best move by black is queen f6. Now, why is this the best move for black? Let's see. If knight takes c3, then bc, and on bishop takes c3, knight b5 gives almost decisive advantage to white. And if bishop takes c3, b takes c, castle, white also has advantage, knight b5. You see the big difference in this position between bishop on f4 and bishop on e3. So now after knight b5, white also has serious initiative. Queen takes d1, rook takes d1, and now if knight c6, protecting a7 pawn, then if knight c6, then simply after f3, white is almost winning, because knight f6, there will be knight c7, or even bishop d6, rook d8, bishop c7. It's very, very difficult to play this position for black. In this position, Rybka analyzes as a huge advantage for white. In the game, let me just, I don't think this game has any theoretical value. Well, I just want to tell you that bishop e3 is a bad move, because after knight takes e4, castle, and Botvinnik simply played knight f6. And with bishop on f4, white would have had knight b5. But here, after knight f6, queen f3 was played. White has only very small compensation for a pawn castle. Rook a d1, queen e7, rook f e1, knight c6, queen g3. Of course, getting the pawn back is not very attractive option for white, because black simply has sizable advantage after, well, actually even rook b8 is not necessary here. It's after simple a6. Black has tremendous position. White has to look for some complication. Queen g3, king h8, knight takes c6, pawn takes, bishop d4. All white's pieces placed very well. But the problem is they have no threats. They have no threats, and they are pawn down. Rook d8, rook d3, bishop b7. When you have active position but no attack, eventually development is always a temporary factor, and black is catching up. White cannot catch up on material deficit. And after rook d3, bishop b7, rook e2, e3. This is very unnatural position of the rooks. And after rook takes d4, rook takes d4, bishop c5, rook d1, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3. They agreed to a draw. Of course, black has big advantage. They have an extra pawn for zero compensation. But since Botvinnik, all he needed is a draw to regain, not to regain, to keep the title. And money wasn't a big factor at that point. And for Bronstein, it was very prestigious result, drawing match with the legend of that time, Botvinnik, but not winning the world championship title was very prestigious and very acceptable for him. This is the story of 1950 match. Well, I know I was then only like 6, 7 years old, and I remember how it had absolutely enormous interest in the chess world. And in Russia, chess was like number one activity after dirty game of politicians. The chess game was only thing that would make people happy and excited. So thank you very much, and see you next time for a different lecture.